The refrigerator sitting in your kitchen right now is one of the most trusted objects in your home. You open it without thinking. You stock it, organize it, rely on it. But for the first few decades that mechanical refrigeration existed inside ordinary houses, a significant number of people were convinced it was quietly trying to kill them. That fear was not irrational. It was, in fact, chemically reasonable. Most people assume the refrigerator has always been more or less what it is today, a cold box, humming quietly, keeping the milk fresh. The assumption is that the technology arrived, improved, and settled. Straightforward progress. What that story leaves out is the 40-year gap between the machine that worked and the machine that was safe to live with. To understand why the first domestic refrigerators were genuinely dangerous, you have to understand what they were replacing and why that replacement took so long. For most of human history, keeping food cold meant keeping it near ice. Natural ice, cut from frozen lakes and rivers in winter, stored in insulated chambers, and delivered to homes and businesses through a remarkably organized trade. The icebox, a cabinet lined with zinc or tin, packed with a block of ice on top and food below, was a standard household fixture for close to a century and a half before the mechanical refrigerator replaced it. The system worked. It was also expensive, logistically complicated, dependent on geography and season, and in warmer climates, unreliable. The ice melted. It had to be replaced. And in summer, in a southern city, the iceman's route determined whether your meat kept or spoiled. There is a detail worth pausing on here. The icebox was not a primitive solution waiting to be superseded. It was a functioning technology embedded in an entire industry, ice harvesting, ice storage, ice delivery, that supported thousands of livelihoods. When mechanical refrigeration began to mature, it was not stepping into a vacuum. It was displacing something that, for most households, was already working. The question was whether the new machine would be safer, more reliable, and more affordable. The answer, for longer than the appliance's clean modern reputation suggests, was not obviously yes. Artificial refrigeration had been theoretically understood since the mid-1700s and was developing practically in the early 1800s. The first working vapor compression refrigeration system, the same fundamental technology that operates in your refrigerator today, was built in 1834. Commercial ice-making machines arrived by the 1850s. Commercial refrigerator and freezer units were operating in industry and food storage for almost 40 years before anyone brought a comparable machine into a private home. That delay was not purely economic. It was chemical. The refrigerants that made early mechanical cooling work were not benign. To move heat out of a sealed compartment, a refrigerant needs to evaporate and condense in a controlled cycle. The substances that performed this job efficiently in the early systems, among them sulfur dioxide and methyl chloride, were toxic. Sulfur dioxide is a suffocating, corrosive gas. Methyl chloride is colorless, nearly odorless, and when it leaks in a confined space, it can cause unconsciousness, organ damage, and death. These were not remote industrial hazards. These were the working fluids circulating through sealed mechanical systems bolted into family kitchens. Refrigerators for home use appeared in 1913, according to the documented record. Frigidaire introduced the first self-contained home unit in 1923. Through the 1920s and into the 1930s, refrigerators were being sold and installed in homes across the United States while running on these compounds. The machines were marketed as modern, clean, and efficient. The fear that surrounded them was not superstition. Leaks happened, mechanical seals failed, refrigerants escaped, families were harmed. This is the strange layer that the clean, humming appliance in your kitchen erases from memory. The domestic refrigerator, during the first decades of its existence, was a machine you had to trust with your life in a fairly literal sense, not because of what it did to food, but because of what it contained. The modern promise of the refrigerator, extend the life of food, slow the reproduction of bacteria, maintain a stable cold environment, was real. The engineering around it was genuinely precarious. It is worth holding that contradiction for a moment. The refrigerator's core purpose, reducing bacterial reproduction and keeping food safe, was itself a health argument for the appliance. Yet the mechanism that delivered that benefit introduced a different category of health risk into the same room. The icebox did not leak poison. The mechanical refrigerator in its early domestic form sometimes did. Progress and hazard arrived together in the same cabinet on the same kitchen floor. The transformation came from chemistry, not from engineering refinement alone. In the late 1920s, work began on developing a refrigerant that was stable, non-toxic, and non-flammable. Freon, a chlorofluorocarbon, answered all three requirements by the standards of the time. It did not poison people in enclosed spaces. It did not corrode rapidly. It did not catch fire. The introduction of Freon in the 1920s directly expanded the refrigerator market through the 1930s. That expansion was not primarily about falling prices or rising incomes, though both played a role. It was about the removal of a legitimate, documented danger. Once the chemical threat receded, the refrigerator's penetration into ordinary domestic life accelerated. Home freezer compartments large enough for actual food storage, not merely ice trays, appeared in 1940. Frozen foods shifted from luxury item to ordinary staple. The freezer-over-refrigerator design that defined kitchens for most of the 20th century became standard in that same era and held its position until side-by-side configurations eventually broke the pattern. The machine that had once required a degree of calculated courage to install in your kitchen became the furniture of everyday life. What survived from those early decades is the mechanism itself. The vapor compression cycle that was first demonstrated in 1834, refined through the industrial era, and then brought into homes in the 1910s and 1920s, is still the operating principle of the appliance in your kitchen. The refrigerants changed, the seals improved, the cabinets became insulated to higher standards, the thermostats more precise. But the fundamental method, pump heat out of an insulated space using a cycling refrigerant, has not been replaced. It has been made safe enough that the danger it once represented is now genuinely invisible. What did not survive is the memory of the transition. The icebox lasted a century and a half and was replaced by something that, for a generation of households, required a degree of trust the technology had not fully earned. The refrigerant leaks, the toxic gases, the years during which the modern kitchen's most essential appliance was also its most chemically hazardous occupant, these did not become part of the appliance's public story. The refrigerator arrived in cultural memory as progress. Clean, cold, reliable progress. The legend of frictionless technological improvement settled over it like condensation on a cold surface, obscuring what the documented record actually shows. The record is more complicated than that. The machine that now maintains 3 to 5 degrees Celsius to keep your food safe from bacterial reproduction is the direct descendant of a device that made households weigh convenience against the possibility of a chemical leak in an enclosed room. The safety we take for granted was the specific problem that had to be solved before the refrigerator could become ordinary. Not the cold. The cold was understood. The danger was what it cost to produce it. Next time you hear that quiet hum, you are hearing the end of a 40-year negotiation between a genuinely useful technology and the chemical price of making it work inside a home. The negotiation is over. The fridge won. But it took a different kind of chemistry and a longer, harder road than the appliance's spotless modern surface suggests.